Hey, Joyful Journeyer. Anita Adams here, your host, and I'm excited to have a special guest joining me today to talk about the transformative power of breathwork and how it guides us to access our inner wisdom. Leo Mars is a writer, creative strategist, and founder who helps people reconnect with their innate clarity and spark fresh inner guidance. Raised in the wilds of Alaska, he launched his first business at 12 years old, eventually building award-winning nightlife venues and America's first modern breathwork studio. Leo blends ancient wisdom with forward-thinking imagination, awakening what he calls natural intelligence, the clarity that flows when we stop outsourcing our knowing. His work supports people in noticing their deeper guidance, stepping into purpose, and co-creating joy and soulful futures worth living. Talk about a perfect guest for the Joyful Journey podcast.
Uh,
Welcome, Leo. Thanks for being
Oh, thanks for having me, Anita. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm delighted. All right. So let's start with hearing about the journey that brought you to the work you are doing today.
Sure. Well, it's a long and winding path, as we all know from our long and winding lives. I would say I was always really interested in the teachings of Jesus Christ, like going back, like I was raised in the church, raised in a private school, memorized half the Bible before I really learned any science. And I always thought like Jesus Christ knew what was up.
Hmm.
And so even though it was it was very indoctrinating, kind of almost like cult-like environment, especially like in these little towns in Alaska, like plugging into these little churches and kind of being feigned from any form of rational thinking in a way. It was like just go to the Bible. I always felt a connection to the mysticism and the magic of Christ's teachings. So, I would say like on some level, I've always seen life as a kind of, big juicy apple to take a bite out of and you know, saw life as magical, kind of inherently magical. And so I was kind of always on that path. As a builder, I grew up building for my father. So I was always, constructing things. I knew that essentially the impossible, the imaginary could be made manifest. And so my life has really kind of been dotted by a lot of creation, building spaces, building venues, commercial venues that would gather people together to experience something. And it was always, a desire to facilitate emergence for people, like some kind of a eureka or aha or a moment of beauty or shared connection. And, when I was 27, I was running at the time it had won several awards and it was a 4-star restaurant and kind of nightclub. And I slipped into an altered state in the shower while visiting my dad in Alaska. And that really, I would say, was the kind of the cracking of my world in a way that really got me to hone in on, I guess, what I would say was consciousness. I had this early, this state was, I would kind of classify it as a non-dual state. So my sense of self was nowhere to be found. It wasn't out of body. I was still, looking through my eyes, but my I-ness wasn't bound to my person, to my body, to my psyche. But inside of this state, there was this knowing. It was almost like a state without qualities. Maybe, it was more of an emptiness and an allness and a freedom and an everywhereness. But one of the only qualities it had was a sense that I could just effortlessly exhale a universe into existence, like omnipotence.
Mm.
And so, that really kind of shifted my life in a drastic way. Within less than 2 months, I'd sold the venue. Someone had approached me to buy the venue. I sold the venue, went on kind of a soul quest, got into Joe Dispenza and, what the heck is going on with my mind? Who am I? And, it wasn't until I found the breath that, prior to finding the breath, actually, I'd gone through several years, quite a few years of depression, but also like very intentional, deep psychedelic use where I would fast for 24 hours and then I would go deep with mushrooms or something like that to understand what's going on. So I would say, that's kind of the gist of it. In short, that's kind of how I ended up here. Ended up spending some time with a great American philosopher named Ken Wilber, whose life's work is known as integral theory. And that helped me kind of make sense of my path in a way that was rational, but also like could fully make space for the mystical and the mystery and the irrational. Yeah.
Awesome. That's it's so interesting, all of that. And that moment that you were in the shower, y there was a knowing that I'm hearing you, there was a knowing that there was something more, but am I hearing you correct? You weren't quite sure yet what that was. You knew that you needed to make a
Mm.
shift in the work you're doing, correct? And then
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
led you down the path. And how did you come to breath work?
Yeah. So that came about, I would say, it appeared to be kind of non-linear or kind of happenstance in the first place. I had gotten just immediately after that experience in the shower, I basically became a yogi and got really into yoga. And yoga, the basis of yoga is pranayama, is the breath. But that's a very kind of very, in a way, simple, not to diminish it, but it's a simple form of breath work. So that went on for at least a decade before I really discovered breath work, like breath as an active practice. And that came about through it was kind of one thing to another. It was, a deep practice in pretty much Ashtanga yoga. And then it was a couple of years in Kundalini. And in Kundalini, it was like, okay, something's going on here with the breath. And then I want to say it was 2015 that I first had just like very pure form of breathwork experience. Before it was kind of really kind of like before it was trending, um, I was invited to a breathwork class in Venice, California. And as we all know, Venice is a very progressive place. It was kind of like just starting to bud there. And I went into a very kind of altered state. I do everything at 100%. And so I'm laying there and they're like, breathe like this. And it was holotropic breath work. It was belly, chest, release. And I did that at 110%, which I never did since because that was just too much. So when I came to, I was literally, I didn't know where I was. I had soaked my clothing in sweat. I didn't really know what was happening, but I couldn't stop breathing. And that was kind of like, wow, I didn't have any particular like emotional kind of breakthroughs in that first experience, but I knew there was something to this breath thing. And and so I got further into that. And then eventually in early 2018, I opened the Breathwork Studio. And it was through really, not only participating in all of these sessions, and for me, it's like, 2 out of 3 sessions, I have a kind of like come to Jesus revival moment. It's like, oh my gosh. But seeing thousands of people come through, come to the door, checking in with, the weight of the world on their shoulders and leaving with a spark in their eye, with hope, with a sense of lightness. Yeah.
That's gotta feel good and empowering, like, you're not only creating that for yourself, but, supporting others on that journey. Are there different types of breath work that lead to different results?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, pretty much like this term breath work. I don't actually like to use the word breath work because it's really not work. Once you have what I would call a big experience, you really want to go back to it. It's like, oh, good. Now I get to treat myself to this delicious breath of mine. Um, so I don't like to call it that, but yeah, there's absolutely so many different ways. Pretty much any intentional kind of manipulation of the breath would be considered breath work. And there's so many different ways to do that. There's boxed breathing. There's 3-part holotropic breathing that we mostly kind of served at our studio was mostly all this laying down, 3-part breathing. And then there's, all the variations, breath of fire and so many different forms, connected Wim Hof breathing, all of them, the way that I see it, any form of rhythmic breathing, whether it's boxed or, any of the ones I just named, and there are so many more, it kind of acts like if you think of like, living in the modern day as a modern human, it's just inherently stressful. You just, you know, walk out the door and, you have to cross the street at the right time, else you die. You have to, deal with, debt collectors and, the stress of just like all the stresses of modern life and health issues and all the things, relationships. And our breath is kind of like a direct mirror. It's like, it's this physiological kind of interface. And like Thich Nhat Hanh says, it's the bridge between our mind and our body. But what we don't, I think, generally, I think we take it for granted. Our breath responds in real time to our lives. So, when you're, getting cut off in traffic, you might hold your breath or, start breathing shallowly. You'll get that whole cascade, that neuroendocrine cascade of stress hormones and whatnot. But our breath is that kind of like that first line that responds to the world. So yeah, the way that I see it now is that any form of rhythmic breathing kind of acts like an iron or like a steamer to the wrinkles in the fabric of our kind of erratic breathing, just being modern humans.
Right. I like that you used the phrase that our breath is our first line. And what immediately popped to mind is it's our first line of defense in a way too, isn't it? And if we can use it
Mhm,
in that
mhm,
regard too, like if we get cut off and
mhm,
we can turn
mhm.
or get cut off in traffic, we can turn to
Yeah,
our breath to help settle.
and
Um,
we kind of do that naturally, there's, you look at like a gazelle gets chased by, cheetah, let's say, and it survives. It will do this. Often it'll do this double inhale, exhale. And that's kind of like, it's a natural response. We even see our pets do it, our dogs do it. We do it, like you might be a little bit tired or you went through something challenging and you'll just naturally go.
right.
And what's really neat about that is that our bodies know, like so that double inhale, basically just like blowing up, when we blow up like a balloon, the first blow is usually kind of hard. And then the second one inflates the balloon. Well, our lungs are filled with millions of these little alveoles, these little air sacs. And so this is a way to kind of like, in a way, like counteract, get back to baseline, self-regulate after stress or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Towards the end of the show, I'm going to actually ask you to walk us through a breath exercise that we can teach something for the listeners, but we'll come back
Mhm,
to that later. I
mhm.
feel like science is finally caught up on the whole benefits of breath work. Can you give us? And this is a big question, but I'm hoping you might be able to give us just a little bit of a snapshot view of the science behind breath work.
Absolutely. And there's so much, and there's really a lot coming out pretty much every week right now. There was, as far as like these, what I would call like transformative breath work or transformative breathing, there's a lot of different things that you can do with the breath. I would say, in general, we're engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's just kind of fundamental. Most breaths, including, breath of fire, which is thought to be, more of an energizing breath, you will notice that you're more kind of relaxed and calm after you breathe like this. And the way that I see that, you know, and so I'm not the world's foremost scientist on the breath, but I'm very fascinated by it. There's a couple of things. One, our daily breathing, we want to do that through our nose for so many reasons. We're conditioning the air. One of the things I think is most fascinating is we're endogenously, we're creating this nitric oxide, nasal nitric oxide, which is, they say, there are two ways to get nitric oxide in the human organism, and one is through breathing through your nose. The other is through eating green leafy vegetables. But what's really kind of profound about this, I want to say it was 1999, nitric oxide was called the molecule of the year. And there were a handful, I want to say 3 scientists that won a Nobel Prize for their work with this nasal nitric oxide. Actually, it was with nitric oxide at large, but these scientists, they had a more difficult time finding uh, functions in the human organism that were not facilitated or co-facilitated by nitric oxide than were. So this molecule called nitric oxide, it has a half-life of like 2.5 seconds, like fairy dust.
Mm.
And it's made in the mucosal membrane of our nose. So when we breathe through our nose, it's creating this fairy dust, this nitric oxide, which it's a vasodilator, promotes digestion, it promotes like healthy blood flow and so many processes. So that's one really interesting thing. You want to breathe through your nose. Essentially, the nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating, full stop. So going so far as you've probably heard of mouth taping, or maybe you've done it or do it. Do you mouth tape?
No, I don't, but I have heard of it
Okay.
recently, and I thought,
Yeah.
"What? We
Yeah.
actually do that?" Okay. People go
Yeah.
to sleep, they close their mouth, right?
Yes.
Or not
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
not.
Yes.
I should probably do that because I always wake up with my mouth, like, so dry, obviously, because it's,
Yes.
like, wide open.
Yes. This is one of the like most low hanging fruit for what I would call that a form of breath work. You're manipulating the natural breath. I don't use any of the like branded or, fancy mouth tapes. I've tried them and I actually prefer just this very cheap 3M tape. It's like so thin. It's like thinner than paper. And I just put this little piece right here. I've been doing that now for 4 years. I would say across the board, it will improve one's sleep by 15 to 25%.
Really? That's interesting. Mouth tape. I didn't even know there was actually something that was, created specifically for that purpose. I thought you just get, some duct
Yeah,
tape
yeah.
or something.
There is now. I mean, these products are new as of the last like 3 years
Okay,
because of all this.
I'm gonna source it out and I'll put a link in the show notes for people to check that out. So
Yeah, yeah, and I can send you a link to this stuff. Like I've tried, like I said, I've tried them all, and
yeah.
yeah. So you think even when you're like, if you roll over and you sleep on your side for a few minutes, that might crack your mouth open, and then even unbeknownst to us, we're breathing through our mouth, we're dehydrating ourselves, we're also losing the benefits of that nitric oxide while we sleep.
Neat.
So there's a number of reasons to do that. So that's baseline. Everyday breathing, breathe through your nose, eat through your mouth. Um, you know, some of these styles of breath will hyperventilate, so you'll off gas more CO2. And for the longest time, I thought, because when you lay down and do 3-part breathing, you'll feel these like tingles and this lightness, and start to feel really good.
Hmm.
And I thought we were actually upregulating oxygen in the blood, but pretty much at a resting state, we're all at more or less like a 98% blood oxygen saturation. So it's actually happening like when you're doing many of these styles of breathing is you're off-gassing CO2, you're reducing blood flow to the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which I've come to believe is directly tied to why you can have revelations and insights, why fear falls away. And these types of things happen when you do this active breathing. You're actually turning down, you're reducing blood flow to this part of our brain that essentially the personality kind of exists. The higher brain thinking exists. And when we do that, it's kind of like getting out of our way, you know? If you imagine like what are we doing when we meditate? Well, we're essentially observing these thoughts, we're observing the thinking. What if we could just physiologically turn down that process where it didn't matter what was going on, what our belief systems are, what state of mind we're in, or what type of day we're having. it's going to give us this reduction in thinking, basically. There's also hormesis. So, we often like some people would be like, oh, like hyperventilating and kind of like dismissing it as some kind of like childish, you know, um, not very useful thing. Oh, it's just hyperventilating. Well, sure, hyperventilating. We almost have a negative connotation around it, but we're also putting our organism, our body brain into a state of hormesis, so like healthy stress. And there's all sorts of research that's been done around Wim Hof and his style of breathing, where you're actually boosting immunity by putting your body into these states of hormesis, whether that's through cold or through, intense rhythmic breathing, etc.
Wow, there's a lot there that you just shared. It's what I'm really liking is you're suggesting that the how breathing can really lead to transformation, um, and how breathing is it's accessible to everybody, anywhere, anytime. It's like you don't have to pay for anything special. You don't have to get any special equipment except for maybe a little bit of mouth tape. But you this is really accessible. I want to dive into the transformation piece of it.
Mhm.
It's more than just calming, right? It's more than just calming the mind. It's a doorway to self-awareness. And you've shared with me even self-love. That really speaks to me. I feel like I'm on a mission in this world to help people really fall in love with who they are. That
Mm.
is where I believe deep transformation happens. So, and that's when we can really access that inner wisdom. So, the question for you is, what have you discovered about the relationship between breath presence and acceptance of who we really
Mm.
are?
Yeah, I love that question because it really gets to the heart of why I do what I do and have been for now 7 years in the space. So there's two kind of sides to that. One, this what we might call breath work. In that process, you are disengaging the thinking mind. You are engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. So what happens often, and it's not every session, but I would say most sessions, there will be. It's almost kind of like you give up trying in a way. The way that I like to see it is between birth and death, there's breath. So like on every exhale, you're essentially expiring. You're kind of dying. You can practice in these little mini cycles, in a way, mastering life by mastering death. We've all heard like the masters talk about like the mini deaths and die before you die. Every exhale, we can just go, oh, where's the tension? What am I attached to? What am I holding on to? Letting it go, breathing in life, breathing out life. So you can use the breath as a practice in that way. And then in the active breathing, you're kind of doing the heavy lifting. Like if there's stuck, trapped emotions, if there's things you're holding on to, aspects of your personality that are kind of like in lockstep, they will begin to soften and kind of just naturally kind of process through and out of your system. And so that to me, I understand is like making it easier to be here now, or as what I like to say, breathe here now. So it's easier to be present if you're not holding on to stuff, right? It's easier to like yourself if you're not holding on to stuff. It's more enjoyable to be yourself if you're not holding on to stuff. So that's one component of it. Then the other component of it is something that I just discovered within the last 2 or 3 years, and that is just breath awareness without manipulating the breath. So when we're present, we're not in fear, we're not in worry, we're not in regret. When we're present, we have more access to our natural intelligence. We've all had those experiences where it's like, wow, how was I was so like in flow. I was on fire. I was intelligent, loving, gracious, compassionate, intuitive. I was responding to life. For me, for the longest time, it would drive me crazy slipping into those states of flow. And like, who is this person? Like, I want to be that guy that's eloquent and funny and, receptive. And so the breath awareness, Eckhart Tolle says in A New Earth, he says that you cannot take a conscious breath and think at the same time. Conscious breathing stops your mind. And so, if you try that, it might seem like, you know, overly simple or like, I know for me, I was like, well, yeah, 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 yeah. But like, you know, I want to feel it. But the truth is, if you do start to practice that, just like in Vipassana, in the Buddhist style of meditation, you start by going to your breath. You feel the breath going in and out of your nose. And then you take the awareness in deeper. And that's kind of like the second layer of breath awareness, taking that awareness into your body. So you start with your breath and bring it into your body. And then from there, you can start to make decisions that are aligned kind of more energetically with what feels good. And that's just, that's kind of the key to life is following the path that feels good, not just on a superficial level, but on a deep level. So for me, I've used and I continue to use the breath work to do the heavy lifting, to deal with the stress and untangle my mind. And then I use the breath awareness to return to the moment where I am.
Do you think that it's simply returning to the moment of where you are that helps us love who we are? Is that what you're saying?
I think it's a
That
big part of it. Yeah. I know for me, I had a revelation a couple years ago where I was like, what's going on? There's something in my subconscious that I can't seem to work through. And I realized that my kind of relentless, um, kind of like my relentless drive to become, to evolve myself, to improve myself was on a deep level, it was fortifying a belief that I wasn't enough and I was
Mm.
never enough. And I think that's a big part. And it's tricky because in some ways it's a bit of a toxic collective belief in the health and wellness space is like self-improvement. I mean, it's literally called self-improvement. Well, if you're always, seeking to improve yourself, then on a deep level, you're always not accepting yourself as you are. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it does. That's really interesting. And I love the simplicity of it. It doesn't take much to to breathe, and that's it's just accepting the breath and the
Mhm.
moment.
Yes.
This feels like a good time actually to ask you to walk us through a breath
Yeah.
work exercise, something that we can
Yeah.
begin using right now to support our journey towards greater self-acceptance. Do you have
Hmm.
something that you can do with us right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I like to do this one because it's quick and easy, and you'll get a kind of quick feel good release in the body that's tangible. So what we can do, if you're driving, don't do this. And and if you're not driving, please do this. So, if you do have the option to lay down, try laying down for this. It'll make it a little bit easier. And let's just start. Yeah, let's start by closing our eyes and just breathing naturally together. Let's breathe in and out through our nose, not manipulating the breath, just breathing, being aware. Breath is only ever happening in our bodies in the moment. So bring your attention to our breath or bring your attention to the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 10 breaths together and we'll inhale through our nose and we'll exhale through our nose. And on the 10th breath, we're going to hold at the top of the inhale for about 10 or 15 seconds. And then we're going to release. On that last one, let's release out our mouth. And you want to make that on the final exhale, we'll really drag that out. When we extend our exhales, what's happening is the diaphragm is pushing up against our heart, which constricts the veins in and around our heart area, which tells our brain we don't need to breathe. It's basically signaling to our brain that we're okay, we have what we need. So let's breathe naturally for another moment, and it'll count for us. And we'll start by exhaling everything out together. And let's begin. Inhale, release. Big, deep inhale, release. Big inhale, release. Inhale, release. Inhale, release. Halfway there. Inhale, release. Inhale, release. Inhale, release. Two more. Inhale, release. Last one. We'll inhale and hold. Keep holding. And release. Slow. Just noticing how you feel in your body. Maybe you feel a little wave of calm, relaxation. You can open your eyes.
That was great.
Yeah.
Very nice.
How do you feel?
Very relaxed and present, obviously. It's something, and I was thinking while I was doing this, it's like, oh, I can bring this to my board meetings and different things to help with my the team that I lead. And I like that. I like a practice that I've started in the probably the last 6 months or so. Is starting each meeting, and before I go on for my podcast, I'll do some kind of breathing exercise. Sometimes I'll just go into a little bit of meditation or prayer, and it really helps to get me settled. And I like this because it doesn't require much. You don't have to think it through. I don't have to, I often lead grounding exercises, and I have to
Mm.
think out what is that grounding exercise.
Mm.
This
Mm.
is super simple, and it has
Yeah.
the desired effect of getting you really present, and you can do it anywhere,
Mhm.
before a big a big meeting or anything that makes you nervous or a
Mhm.
little fearful. So thank you for sharing that with us, Leo. I really, really appreciate it. And I know the Joyful
Yeah,
Journey are listening also is appreciating this. I can feel it. I can feel it.
absolutely. And another one just to keep in mind is you can always do the double inhale, exhale. And how you do that is just extending that exhale.
Is that in through the nose twice and out through the mouth, or okay?
It would work either, but I always suggest through the nose when possible.
And what's the benefit of that particular practice?
So that is a very quick way. It's essentially, Dr. Huberman says that's the fastest way to de-stress, known to science. Sometimes it's called the double inhale sigh, because if you make a noise on the exhale, yeah, you're actually creating that nitric oxide. If you are short on time, if you're about to walk into a meeting or an interview or who knows what, that'll get you, that'll
And
get you there.
do you need to do it like 3 times, 10 times, or just however
If you
until
got, if you got time,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay, but,
yeah.
like, just
I
once or
mean, that's
twice can actually help settle you.
absolutely. And that
Okay.
is the essence of holotropic breathing, which is really kind of probably the most transformative style of breathing is belly, chest. Ah,
Belly, ah.
ah.
But that felt kinda weird. Belly, I have to think too hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it doesn't have to be. I mean,
Okay,
that's when you're laying down and you really have full control. But like if you're just walking down the sidewalk or whatever, you can just double inhale.
got it. Okay, I love it, I love it. So simple, awesome.
Yes.
Okay, my last question for you, Leo, is simply this: what's one message or insight you hope people take away from your work with breath?
Hmm. Um, this is I feel like is this is my the drum I've been beating for a couple of years, only because it's been so transformative for me. But y- you already are what you seek to be.
Mhm.
You are, you know, billions of years of life evolving. And what we are is so incredible, so intelligent, complex, graceful, intuitive. Um, and so come back to the moment and you'll find you already are what you wish you were.
That's beautiful. I love that. Leo, thank you so much for your presence, for your time here with us today, for showing up authentically as yourself, fully, completely, beautifully. I so appreciate you. I so appreciate this conversation and this simple reminder just to come back to breath, to come back to who we truly are. And who we are is everything we need to be: love, light, joy. That's who we are. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you, Anita.
And Joyful Journeyer, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody. Let them know to turn back, return to breath, like it, comment. We love hearing from you. And I send you with love, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.